Lesson 17, Consolidated Democracies. So Consolidated Democracies. This is kind of an interesting title here for democratic governments. Okay, so there are three basic types of government. This is kind of what starts off this section, Chapter 25, Section 1. Long-standing democracies, democracies that have been around for a little while, and nations in transition to democracy. So long-standing democracies, that would be the United Kingdom, the United States of America, Australia. Nations in transition to democracy, that's going to be places like Mexico, and we were hoping Russia, but more and more it looks like Russia falls into the third category, authoritarian governments. And authoritarian governments, those are places that we'll usually think of those as communist countries or dictatorships or something like that. Consolidated democracies have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 characteristics that the book talks about. They have fair elections, competing parties, and that means political parties. Constitutional rights are protected, usually written down in a constitution. An independent judiciary, in other words, the executive branch and the legislative branch don't just kind of control the judiciary. Although this can be blurred, it may not be quite as independent as, say, ours is. And some sort of market economy. That means some sort of system in where people get to own stuff and work hard and profit from their labor and from their intelligence and trading and so on. So the we're going to get to parliamentary systems first. Executive and legislative powers in a parliamentary system are centered in an elected assembly, the parliament, and parliaments usually select the cabinet, the leaders of the executive branch, who help whoever the chief executive is. Like in our country, we have the president, and we have our cabinet, which has the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, and so on in it. And so they also have cabinets in these parliamentary systems. Great Britain is a great example of a parliamentary government. They have a bicameral, two-house parliament. They have the House of Lords, which long time ago was really powerful, and the House of Commons, which is nowadays much more powerful. Members in the House of Commons are elected and known as MPs or Members of Parliament, and they usually have 5-year terms. We're going to find out there are special circumstances where their terms can kind of be cut short, so to speak. In the House of Commons, well, remember, it's more powerful than the House of Lords. They determine legislative and financial policies. Most bills are introduced in the House of Commons by the majority party, and a majority vote is needed to pass a bill. And sometimes there isn't one party that is truly a majority party because they have a multi-party system in the United Kingdom. So therefore, sometimes 2 or more parties have to form a coalition, an alliance, in order to hold the majority and control government. The House of Lords, it's dominated by 540 life peers. These are folks who are awarded a title for outstanding service or achievement. And this goes in 1999. A reform law removed the right of all except 92 hereditary peers to sit and vote in the House. So there used to be about 1,200 members, most of whom had inherited titles. That's changed quite a bit. So it's much more democratic than it used to be in the House of Lords. The Prime Minister, a key position in the parliamentary government of the United Kingdom. The Prime Minister will be the leader of the majority party in the House of Commons. This guy pictured here is David Cameron. He is from the Conservative Party. They have formed a coalition with the, I believe, the Liberal Democratic Party to control government right now. The Prime Minister chooses other ministers to head departments and chooses other ministers to serve as cabinet members. Now, David Cameron is the current Prime Minister, probably the most famous Prime Minister during, the time you might be aware of things would be Tony Blair, who worked with George Bush in the terrorist stuff that was going on and going into Iraq and Afghanistan. So one of the things about these parliaments is you can have failing coalitions. The prime ministers can lose the support of their party and have to resign, and if that majority party loses an important vote, Parliament will dissolve and new elections will be held for the House of Commons. So government can basically end, so to speak, and have to be reformed. And that will get us to a term we're gonna discuss here in just a second. Well, just a few minutes actually. Now we're going to move on to Japan. Japan also has a bicameral legislature. It's called the National Diet as opposed to Parliament. The upper house is the House of Councillors, and the lower house is the House of Representatives. It's sort of kind of a mishmash of the English system, its own system, and there are shades of the U.S. system in here. And this goes back, this type of government was developed in Japan after World War II, when it was occupied by the U.S. The National Diet is the highest power in the state, and it's the only lawmaker, and it controls money policies, which of course makes it very powerful. It's kind of complicated how elections are handled. They have members chosen from election districts, and each district, with a single exception, elects 3 to 5 representatives, and each member of the lower house is elected for 4 years. And then you get in the House of Councillors, and they have a different system there, where it's based on a different kind of representation, which your book doesn't really get into, so we'll move on. So the House of Representatives elects Prime Minister and has the power to vote no confidence in the Prime Minister or in the Prime Minister's cabinet. They can override a negative vote from the House of Councillors to pass a bill. So bills normally have to pass both houses to become a law, but if the House of Councillors, basically chooses not to pass a bill, if the House of Representatives can get 2/3 of its majority to agree, they can go ahead and get it passed. So the House of Councillors, they have 6-year terms. Unlike the House of Representatives, they cannot be dissolved, so they're just going to run through their term the whole time, but they are still the weaker house. Japan's cabinet includes cabinet members known as ministers of state, which includes the Deputy Prime Minister and heads of agencies like the Economic Planning Agency. So a key concept, this is what I was talking about earlier that would come in seconds and then came in minutes. In America we call the President and his cabinet departments the administration. In parliamentary systems, they call the Prime Minister and the cabinet the government. So when the government, meaning the Prime Minister and the cabinet, loses a key vote, the legislature will be dissolved and new elections will be held. So in the case of Britain, those 5-year terms, well, if the government dissolves, they'll have elections earlier than 5 years.